My name is Emmanuel Achapa. I'm honored to be here and basically to talk about what branding is and a few things around branding. So first of all, branding is the process of creating a brand. And a brand, as you may know or have an idea, is basically the value you create out of a business line or product that is away from your personal value. So essentially it's a matter of trying to, you start something out, but eventually you want to separate yourself from it. At the end of that path, there's what we call brand equity. So brand equity generally is a value that your brand accrues over time. And building a brand is more or less like running a business in itself. So at the end of the day, you want to believe that you can resell your brand, and that's a process. Now, in the Kenyan context, the word brand has been thrown around quite a bit. And if you're doing any kind of business, you will realize that more than enough times you've come across the word branding. But it starts somewhere. And so if you're running a business, the first thing you want to do is to identify what kind of business you want to go into. Then you want to give it an identity. So the process of giving your brand or entity an identity of itself is actually the first point in trying to build a brand. And that actually comes after you've figured out a number of things. What is it that you want to sell? Is it a service? Is it a product? Secondly, you need to figure out who do you want to sell it to. And so that a lot of this consideration, even in making a logo, which is actually the first step into branding, takes into account what is it that you want to sell, what industry, in what industry does it fit, and what clients hopefully will buy your product or service. And so the first step is, after you've done all that, and as a branding strategist, I'd ask you, usually there's something that we call a brief. So we send you a brief and we ask you a number of questions. And one of the questions is, what is the name of your company? What do you want the logo or the icon to do for you? For what purpose, really? So that's just part of understanding what you want the business direction to be. And so in trying to, place your brand, the number of things that have to be considered. Number one is brand colors. Number two, the icon has to be representative of your product, or at least close to your industry. And there's something called color psychology. So colors have meanings. Case in point is, I'll tell you just a few. Blue symbolizes confidence. Green, of course, as you may imagine, sustainability and stuff like that. So some of these brand colors actually have meanings. And so when you're choosing colors, if you're looking for a logo that has a deeper meaning than just an icon for the sake of it, then you need to be able to go through that particular process. So when you pick the brand colors, you fuse them into a logo, and then you begin to build your brand from there. Now, most important, for your brand to grow, you have to develop the goods. We often call products goods and services. The word goods come from really the literal meaning of good. And so you have to be able to develop the goods in whatever you offer. So make sure that at the start of your branding or your business, then you've identified really what value does this product or service offer to your intended consumer. And then of course we have the aspect of now reaching out to who your consumer is. And so we are living in very interesting times, in the age of social media, and then a lot of avenues to do business. You will notice that right now, rarely does a consumer come to the market. In fact, the journey to a decision of purchase of a product or service is a lot closer to the consumer than it used to be before, or rather than it is to the service or product offering. And so you begin to figure out how do you take the product into the market. In a strategic term, we would say a go-to-market strategy. So where are your clients? Where do you find them? Do you find them online? Do you find them in particular areas of the city? Is it a countrywide scope? So how do you get your product to those particular people? So then comes in the channels. And so a lot of businesses happen online. And you'll want to put out information out there. So as far as going online is concerned, one of the easiest ways to go online is to list your business on these online channels. One key one, which actually determines how visible you are, is a Google My Business account by Google. So you need to claim that. It's simple. It's actually a free service by Google. You go online, you register your name and fill up a small form, and then you tell us what you do, what service you offer, what product you sell. And Google actually, when you claim your Google business account, it actually almost works as a social media platform. It allows you opportunity to update every day what's happening, what are you doing, what are you selling. And then of course you put images there just so that people can reach out to you. And then that's also a way of shortening the decision process. Essentially, whenever you sell, all you want to do is to shorten any consumer's decision journey. And that's how you get to a sale sooner. So you need to do that. It's extremely important, even before you begin populating these channels, is you need to identify the personas of your consumer. It's probably someone who is starting off in business, or someone who is growing or rebranding. So then I figured out someone who is growing or branding, they probably do not have a lot of money, or they're struggling to raise what would be the market value of whatever service you want to offer. Number two, they're probably young. If they're not, then if they're older, then it means that probably they've done some other things before. So you try to define in person what kind of experiences that your intended client might be going through. Then you place your service or solution. It's almost like determining what challenges your clients have. And then you know very well that what I'd buy as a consumer is a solution to my challenges, and nothing less, nothing more. And so after you define all those things, then the channels kick in. So there's the Google My Business that I've talked about. There is the website, okay, which is also very important, whether it's an e-commerce platform, whether it's an informational platform. But most importantly, it's supposed to be serving the need for what it is created. You have, in all these solutions, you have to be able to build platforms that are fit for purpose. And sometimes we build websites that look like brochures, which sometimes become very boring because the manner of consumption of information online has changed over time. The way people behave online is also very, very, very different from walking on to a shop to buy anything. So you have to be able to fit all these things together. Something else that I would actually talk about is how do you then position the information that you want to put out there on social media. So make sure there's proper, of course, borrowing from the branding. Make sure there's consistency across all these platforms in terms of branding, colors, information, messaging. A lot of these tiny little things that sometimes might seem not very important. They're extremely important in consolidating your message for the client that you want them to go out to. And then of course there is social media platforms, which are additional channels. So when you put your stuff on Google My Business or your website basically is your home stretch in the online space. So that's where all your information goes. Then you can integrate your website with social media platforms which you have created. Then you can populate the the internet space with the information, targeted. And of course, all these channels now give you an opportunity to promote. And when you promote, you define your target. And then you go out, test your whole process, review, start off again. So either you grow it, you extend it, you change a few things here and there, depending on what kind of feedback you find, and then you keep tightening it up.
What social media platforms should I have my company or my brand on? Why should I have it on Facebook and have it on Twitter at the same time, and have it on Instagram at the same time, and have it on YouTube? What are the differences?
So, products are as many as they come, or services. Some statement is true to the services that you could offer. Then that therefore determines the choice of what platform you want to put your product or service on. Again, boils down to your target. What kind of people? Remember, when we define our persona, someone who is probably on Facebook exclusively might not be my ideal client. I'm probably looking at C-class or what I'd call the CEOs and the directors of companies. That, of course, you would find them on all these social media platforms, but that criteria is more defined on LinkedIn, for instance. So that is the easier platform to find your target market. If you're looking for people who are young and go-lucky kind of people, then of course Instagram might be a very good place to be. Facebook is more often a place for storytelling, so pulls all kinds of people. So it's a jungle of sorts. So drilling through to find your clientele, of course it's possible, but that's a lot more work than it's targeting on Facebook is a lot more difficult than targeting on any other platform. Okay, but of course that difficulty has been cut down a bit by the option of promoting your product or service on FB. So then when you promote, Facebook allows you to define your target in terms of age, in terms of locality, and a lot of other things or interests. Then they're able to scroll and find the right people for your ad. And so the choice of which platform to put up your profile is dependent a lot more on what you're offering and who your target is, basically. The blunders that people do in branding, number one, branding is not a logo. I think everyone talks about this. I like to reiterate, branding is not a logo. And I keep telling my graphic design guys that don't do a logo for anyone. You're doing a disservice to the client, because you would want to know end to end, what does a brand become? And when you're making a decision at the start of that journey, it should be a decision that positively influences the rest of that trip. Now, assuming that someone comes to you that I want you to help me brand, in most cases, what they're asking for is, I want you to do for me a logo. Take the opportunity to advise the client and tell them that I can only do for you a logo if I understand where you're going with this. because you want to be able to fit a proper solution, a befitting one, in that whole journey. So when you have a logo, there's what's called logo applications, that the different elements or items that you want to apply this logo on. Online, printables, all these particular elements, the administrative elements that you have even in the office, invoices, receipt books, all these items. When you do a logo, you should, as a good designer or strategist, be able to look at that whole path and say, I think this particular logo will fit. And that's a thought process. That is giving a solution that lasts a lifetime of a brand, all right? And that's how valuable that process is. And so you ought to be able to understand that whole journey before you do any kind of stuff. So don't just pick, don't just tell me, don't go to any designer and tell them, I need you to do for me a logo. Take your time to understand what is the journey that you intend to embark on in growth for that particular brand. What other blunder do people make in branding? Consistency. Consistency is very important, and I'm saying consistency in terms of the different elements of your brand, and number two, in the messaging and information that you put out there. Someone needs to be able to identify you with something. So when you're all over the place, you lose someone who might actually be following you. So you need to be very consistent in terms of what you deliver as far as your brand is concerned to the target market. Then number three, very important, know that your brand is also a business in itself, and it's supposed to ultimately grow into some value. So give the brand some respect, and be consistent in building it. Every brand that you put work into in building eventually grows into something that actually means value. When you stand away from your brand and look at it, say from without, and say, what value, at what price can I sell this brand? What has the journey been? What do the books look like? What is my team looking like? Is it a brand that attracts a good HR team? Do people have confidence in working for you? Is it something that someone can show off and say, you know what, I'm happy, I'm working with this particular kind of brand? And those are brand aspects. Actually, those are the fruits of building a good brand, because then even hiring process becomes a lot easier. So be very keen on the future of your brand.